Hi, my name is Roger Chandler and this is a copy of the presentation given at the AGTA Construction Materials Testing Conference in Brisbane in 2011. The title of the presentation and associated paper is Increasing Laboratory Efficiency and Value of Laboratory Data while Maximising the Use of Common Data Formats. This presentation has several additional resources available should you wish to investigate further. It has a full copy of an academic paper. It has links to external publications on their own websites, so if you sort of happen to do Google searches for them. A copy of this presentation and also links to some of the software, free and commercial, that are used and talked about in this presentation. For all these resources, just simply go to www.keynetics.com/AGTA 2011. Okay, so today's presentation is going to be in two parts. The first part is really going to talk about the AGS data format, what it is, how it works, and how you can benefit from using it. Just to give you a bit of background on myself, I am a geotechnical engineer, and I've been an active member of the AGS Data Management Committee since about 1997. I'm also a member of the British Standards team on the Geotechnical Data Management Standard that's currently being written, and I'm the UK representative on the DIGS-ML project. So the DIGS-ML project is very similar to AGS, but it's an existing Anglo-American project, if you like, to take an AGS format and turn it into an XML style data file. So I've got a fair bit of background on data formats and geotechnical engineering and the general geotechnical data management. Primarily, my day-to-day job is really assisting laboratories and site investigation companies around the world to improve their data management. I have a fantastic job. One day I could be working in Scotland on someone's kitchen table, working through some logs or some problems that they have, or wanting to increase their efficiency, and the next day I could be working on one of the largest land reclamation jobs in the Middle East, sitting in a porter cabin working through millions and millions of records of data. So my job is very varied. It takes me all over the world, and I get to see everyone's problems and I get to try and solve them, which is a very rewarding and fantastic job. I love it. Second part of the presentation today is really more on the business side of things. So I do have a commercial hat as well as an academic hat, if you like, and I'm the co-founder and managing director of Kinetics. Now, Kinetics supplies a whole range of geotechnical data management solutions, from on-site logging using PDAs or tablets, through borehole logging and data management of a product we've got called Holebase, which is primarily the main borehole logging package in the UK. We also do a geotechnical laboratory management system called KeyLAB, which you'll see more of later. And then we go into a fantastic world of 2D and 3D visualization with AutoCAD. And then finally we go to the national and local web-based archives, and we run the Highways Agency's geotechnical asset management system in partnership with Mott MacDonald's here in the UK. Primarily we have over 400 customers in 23 countries, so again I get to go all around the world and see all sorts of ways that people handle their geotechnical data around the world, and the majority of the UK geotechnical labs at the moment use KeyLAB, or the smaller labs will use KeyAGS to produce their AGS data. So there's a bit of background as to who I am and how I've ended up standing in front of you for the presentation today. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about what we're actually going to do today. I'm going to talk a bit about the current market conditions in the UK and Australia. We're going to talk about client deliverables. What is it a laboratory is going to deliver to a client? Is it data? Is it information? Is it both? Is it neither? And then we're going to finally go on to a bit of information on AGS data formats and its use both in the UK, around the world, and in Australia and New Zealand. And the best ways for the labs to actually capitalise on its introduction. Most labs will see it as a bit of a time-consuming problem or something that's done at the end of the project. If you actually look at AGS at the beginning of the project, as we'll find out, you get a much better view on how useful it can be. Finally, we're going to go into a demonstration to show some of the functionality of the AGS format working to the benefit of laboratories. Okay, so if we just look at the UK business model for a moment, it's slightly different to the Australian business model, but here we have the client who instructs a consultant. The consultant will usually instruct a site investigation company, and they will usually instruct a geotechnical laboratory and or a chemical laboratory. And those two laboratories are usually different entities. Geotechnical laboratories in the UK will do classification testing, they'll do geotechnical chemical testing, so chlorides, sulfates, pHs, things like that. But we have separate chemical laboratories who are doing all the determinants and chemicals. Now it's quite common for the site investigation company and the geotechnical laboratory to be the same company. So companies like Soil Mechanics will be a large site investigation and they will have their own laboratories. It's also relatively common in the UK for consultants to take on some of the role of the site investigation company. So they will send an engineer out on site with a contract driller and they will be logging the information themselves. Now I know this is a very common situation in Australia, where really the consultant is the site investigation company and the consultant usually is the geotechnical laboratory as well. That's not the case in the UK. We usually have some boundaries to provide information between these parties. They're not always the same company. So we have a lot of requirement to move information around. Here on the screen we have effectively 5 companies or bodies involved in that geotechnical data process. So in terms of the UK laboratory market, as we've said, many large SI companies have their own laboratories. There are still quite a few small and independent labs who are primarily working to service the needs of the smaller site investigation companies. But no real consultants have their own laboratories. There is a step gap between there, and again that's something different to what we see in Australia. The construction market in the UK is in recession. We are having a very difficult time with restrictions on both private and public spending, and as a result labs are really fighting to survive, and this has produced an interesting situation where obviously when you get to this point in the business cycle you need to look at making efficiency gains, and quite frankly you need to look at trying to do the same amount of work with less resources, whether that's people, equipment, or whatever. And so this period of recession that we've had have forced laboratories to really stand back and take a look at what they're doing and how they're working, and really review their data management philosophy and processes. One thing that is important in the UK is that data deliverables are vital for any civil engineering project. So if you are involved in any kind of civils work, you will be required to produce AGS data from your laboratory. If you can't do that, then that is a serious downside for any tendering process. So a lot of labs in the UK clued up on what AGS requirements are, what it means to them, and to have ways of producing that information. The Australian laboratory market, this is obviously different, and I'm probably the least qualified person to comment too much on the Australian laboratory market, especially when presenting to a room full of people who work in the Australian laboratory market. So I will keep these comments brief. First of all, we conducted limited research in July 2011. We journeyed around Australia. We met with about 40 companies and asked them various data management questions at senior level. I'm very grateful to anyone who helped me and everyone who helps me in that fact to compile that information in July. It's very, very useful. But one thing I did find from laboratories that were coming over and over again was data deliverables are not often produced, i.e. a laboratory will produce an electronic file which is a PDF file, and that's really it. If the client asks for data, they generally try not to do it because it's too much effort. There's a lot of rekeying going on, and primarily they just keep saying no. In fact, this is a quote I took from one of my interviews. The person who said it, I will remain anonymous, keeps saying no, and eventually they'll stop asking. Well, certainly in the UK, if you keep saying no, they'll stop talking to you and about stop asking. So the market here is much stronger than in the UK, and labs appear very busy. What was common is speaking to the lab side of things, they were aware that there were lots of inefficiencies in their laboratory, and they were very keen to see anything that could help them actually resolve those inefficiencies. So we'll talk more about that as it is. In terms of what your client's doing, I actually had one interview with a company, again will remain nameless, but they said due to the fact that their laboratory was unable to provide them data, they rekeyed 28,000 laboratory results into a copy of their software. 28,000 laboratory results. It took them 3.5 months. Okay, do you think that client is going to want to use that laboratory again? Probably not at the top of the list, I'd imagine. So data deliverables are important in Australia, but they're not being delivered. Okay, so when we talk about data deliverables, what is it we actually mean? Well, data is effectively parameters, variables in their rawest format. Okay, so here we have two illustrations, two pictures here that show the difference between data and information very clearly. So data, we see we just literally have a set of stress-strain values in its simplistic Excel table format, or that could be a text file, or it could be a CSV file, or anything we like. Once you've processed information and you've presented it in a particular way, you have what's called information. And information is usually all collected together and put into the format of a report. Okay, so we can see there that we have the same data being presented, if you like, the same information being presented. We've got stress versus strain, but if you actually wanted to get the numbers out of that presentation and that information, it would be very difficult and very time consuming. So really you can look at data as being the rawest format. Now in AGS terms, we see the rawest format to be the engineering values. So we wouldn't take it all the way back down to millivolts out of an equipment, or tin weights and wet weights. We'd always go back to what we call the rawest engineering values. And they will always be presented within an information sheet or a report, and that report will always be presented to the client. Data won't replace information in your day-to-day workings. So you'll still have a legal binding document or report that you give to the client, but you could effectively give them additional data as well. Okay, so the one big crux everyone has in this data versus information discussion is, what is an Excel spreadsheet? You'll see it appears on both of those lists, and it can be either. In fact, both the screenshot examples at the bottom are taken from Excel. And if you use Excel in terms of its data capabilities, where each worksheet in a spreadsheet is a data tab, very similar to a database, then you could see Excel being used to store data. But primarily it's used being stored as information, and what you'll find is that people are using information layouts to enter their data, which immediately renders their data useless. And we'll go more into that later on. So the golden rules. You remember one thing from this presentation, remember this. Two golden rules of data entry. First golden rule, only enter it once. Okay, sounds obvious, doesn't it? But you'll be surprised when you go back after this presentation, look around your laboratory, look at the number of times that you have entered the sample referencing system, or the sample reference, into any type of system. For example, your storeman may have written it in a big book when it came in. Your lab technicians have written it on top of the lab sheets for every lab work they've done. You've written it on your schedule that you've put on the wall. You've written it on the report outputs. You've written it into the AGS file or any data deliverables. You've put it into management reports. You've put it into disposal reports. Who knows? I will probably be surprised if answering that question you go back to your laboratory today and you have got less than 5 times. So if you can count them on one hand, you're doing pretty well. If you are in the world of utopia, if you like, within laboratory data management, you will only count it once. But I don't expect many people watching this presentation to be able to count it just the once.